They mocked her as the weakest Omega, until the Alpha King claimed her and their unborn child. The wind howled through the frozen towers of the Lichen Kingdom, carrying with it the scent of snow and pine. High above the valleys, the castle stood like a crown of ice and stone, its spires piercing the gray sky. Within the grand halls, power ruled with a firm paw, and loyalty was demanded from every wolf in the pack. Yet among the strong, fierce warriors and ambitious leaders, one young Omega walked as if the cold had wrapped itself around her very soul. Her name was Lyra. She was small, fragile, and often overlooked. The other Omegas whispered about her soft voice and unsteady gait, mocking her in hushed tones. The weakest Omega, they called her. Even the Betas and some of the younger Alphas sneered when she passed. It was as if her very presence reminded them of fragility in a world built for strength. Lyra had learned to keep to herself. She wandered the castle gardens, where frost-dusted hedges twisted like silver serpents, and the moonlight painted every path in shades of silver and shadow. Here, no one could laugh at her or question her worth. Here, she could simply exist, quiet and unseen. She knelt by a patch of frozen herbs, brushing the frost from their leaves. Her fingers were cold, but her mind was busy. The herbs were rare, used in ancient potions and healing rituals. Though the other Omegas mocked her for weakness, Lyra had a secret. She had a gentle skill with life, a way of tending things that others overlooked. Where she walked, life seemed to linger, even in winter. A sudden rustle of leaves made her look up. Her heart skipped a beat as she saw a small wolf cub trapped in a snare hidden beneath the snow. Its tiny body trembled, eyes wide with fear. Lyra's hands shook as she approached, whispering soothing words. "Shhh, it's all right, little one. I'll help you." The snare was sharp, cruel, and old. Lyra's hands bled slightly as she worked to free the cub, but she did not falter. Finally, the metal gave way and the cub scrambled free, nuzzling her hands in gratitude. She smiled softly, brushing its fur. A warmth spread through her chest, a quiet triumph that no one in the castle would ever know. Yet, unknown to her, Kale, the Alpha King, had been watching. From the shadowed balcony above, his eyes were fixed on her small, determined figure. Kale was a man feared by all who knew him. His silver fur and golden eyes marked him as the strongest of the Alphas, and his presence demanded obedience. He was a ruler who commanded with both power and respect, though he rarely showed softness. And yet this fragile Omega stirred something within him, a feeling he had not known in decades. Lyra looked up toward the balcony, shivering from the cold and the strange sense of being observed. But the figure above vanished like mist, leaving only the echo of footsteps on stone. She returned to her herbs, unaware that the Alpha King had noticed her courage, her patience, and most importantly, her gentle heart. Days passed. The snickers and whispers of the castle grew louder, and the plots against Lyra began in earnest. The other Omegas would challenge her to prove her worth, daring her to participate in feats of strength or cunning that were meant to humiliate her. Each time she tried her best, only to stumble or fail in the eyes of the cruel onlookers. Their laughter rang in her ears like a cold drumbeat, yet she did not despair. Within her, a quiet strength began to grow, a stubborn flame that refused to be extinguished. Every act of kindness, every small victory fed it. Even when she was alone in her room at night, staring at the ceiling, she repeated to herself, "I am not nothing. I have worth, even if no one else sees it." One night the castle was quieter than usual. Snow fell like silver dust on the battlements, and the moonlight stretched long shadows across the halls. Lyra wandered once again into the gardens, drawn to the solitude of the frozen world. She thought of the cub she had saved, of the herbs she tended, and of the small things that made life bearable. But the quiet was broken by a sound that made her blood run cold. Footsteps, light but purposeful, approached from the far end of the garden. Lyra froze, her heart pounding. who would be wandering the gardens at this hour? The castle was full of warriors who had no patience for weakness. "Lyra," a deep voice said, smooth and commanding. She turned and her eyes met Cale's. His golden gaze was piercing, yet there was something unspoken in it, a question, a challenge, and a hint of curiosity all at once. Lyra's breath caught. She had seen him before in the halls in the throne room where his presence alone silenced everyone. But never had he spoken to her. She bowed her head, unsure what to say. "You wander alone," Cale said, his voice calm but carrying an unspoken weight. "Do you not fear the world around you?" Lyra's lips trembled. I am careful," she said softly. Her voice was barely a whisper, but she spoke with honesty, and Cale noticed that honesty. It was rare. In a world of masks and power, few dared to show the truth of themselves. Cale stepped closer, the snow crunching under his paws. "Careful is not enough," he said. "Strength is not always measured by muscle or bite. Sometimes it is measured by courage in silence." Lyra did not move. She had never been praised, never been recognized for her small acts of bravery. Her chest swelled with a mixture of fear and a strange, unfamiliar pride. "I have seen you," Cale continued, his gaze never leaving hers. "The way you help others, the way you endure ridicule without faltering. There is a fire within you, little Omega, a fire that many would never see, even if it burned before their eyes." Lyra blinked, unsure if he was speaking to her or to some shadow of the night. The words felt like sunlight breaking through a long winter. And yet she sensed a deeper meaning, something in Cale's eyes that spoke of secrets and burdens, of a loneliness she could not yet understand. Why are you speaking to me?" she whispered. Cale's eyes softened for a moment, almost imperceptibly. "Because destiny does not always speak in roars," he said. "Sometimes it whispers in the quietest voice, and I do not ignore it." Before Lyra could respond, a howl echoed across the valley, sharp and commanding. The castle trembled slightly with the sound, and the wind seemed to carry a warning. Cale's ears twitched and his expression darkened. "Go back to your chambers," he commanded gently. "The night is not safe for even the strongest Omega alone." Lyra hesitated. She wanted to say more, to ask the questions that burned in her mind, but the words caught in her throat. She nodded silently, bowing before retreating. As she disappeared into the shadows, Cale watched her go, his thoughts tangled in a way they had not been for decades. Later that night, Cale stood on the balcony, staring at the snow-covered gardens. He could not shake the image of Lyra kneeling among the frost and herbs, helping the helpless cub. Her small acts of courage, so unnoticed by the world, had left a mark on him, a mark he did not yet understand. In the quiet, a messenger arrived, cloaked in black and bearing a scroll sealed with crimson wax. Cale's golden eyes narrowed as he broke the seal and read the words. The message was brief, but its meaning was chilling. "The weakest Omega will bear the strongest legacy if claimed, or all will crumble." Cale's jaw tightened. The wind tore at his cloak and the snow swirled around him as if echoing the warning. He had ruled the Lycan kingdom for decades, and yet this prophecy shook him. He did not fully understand it, but he knew one thing with certainty. The fragile Omega he had just spoken to would play a role in a fate far greater than she could imagine. As the first light of dawn began to touch the frozen spires, Cale made a decision. He would watch her, protect her, and, if destiny allowed, claim her in ways that would shock the kingdom. For in the quiet, fragile Omega, he saw the potential for strength, courage, and a legacy that could change everything. And Lyra, unaware of the eyes that followed her and the prophecy that now hung over her head, returned to her chambers, exhausted but unbroken. She did not yet know the path that awaited her, the trials, or the power she would uncover, but something in the night had changed her. A presence had noticed her. A king had seen her, and the world, for the first time, felt a little less cruel. The snow fell heavier that morning, blanketing the gardens in silence. And somewhere in the castle, in a shadowed balcony high above, Kale's gaze lingered on the Omega who had unknowingly captured not only his attention, but the threads of fate itself. The Lycan kingdom awoke to tension the next morning. Snow still clung to the battlements, and frost sparkled on the hedges like countless tiny diamonds. In the great hall, whispers rippled through the pack. The alphas, betas, and even the other omegas had gathered to watch the morning rituals. But today, there was an unease in the air, as if something unseen hovered over the castle like a dark cloud. Lyra moved cautiously through the corridors. Her heart was heavy, yet there was a strange sense of anticipation she could not explain. The words of Kale, the Alpha King, and the prophecy that had reached him the night before echoed in her mind. The weakest Omega will bear the strongest legacy if claimed, or all will crumble. She shivered at the thought. The castle could be cruel, and her life had never been easy. The whispers of ridicule, the stares, the cruel challenges from other Omegas, all of it had prepared her for suffering, but nothing could prepare her for what was coming. Kale had not summoned her, at least not directly. But she could sense his presence in the castle, like a shadow stretching silently in every hallway. His golden eyes, so full of power and authority, had lingered in her memory. They were not cruel nor demanding. They were searching, as if he were trying to see something hidden inside her. The great hall doors opened with a resounding clang. Lyra's breath caught. The alphas and betas all straightened, their tails low, ears alert. At the far end of the hall, Kale appeared, his presence commanding silence. The hall itself seemed to shrink under the weight of his gaze. Snowflakes clung to his fur, and his silver claws glinted in the pale morning light. He did not sit upon the throne. Instead, he moved toward the center of the hall, eyes scanning the gathered pack. When they settled on Lyra, she froze, her small hands clenching instinctively. The whispers stopped. Even the most confident betas could not meet his gaze. Lyra, Kale's voice rolled through the hall like distant thunder, calm but undeniable. Step forward. Every eye turned toward her. She hesitated. Her legs felt as though they would betray her, trembling under the weight of so many watchful eyes. She stepped forward slowly, each movement careful, aware that one misstep could make her the subject of ridicule or worse. Kale studied her as she approached. There was a stillness about her, a quiet courage that set her apart. She was fragile, yes, but there was a strength beneath it. The kind of strength that only those who have survived ridicule, hardship, and fear could possess. Today, Kale said, his voice echoing through the hall, I make a declaration that will surprise many. He paused, letting his gaze sweep over the assembled pack. This Omega, who is often called weak, is stronger than anyone has imagined. And because of that strength, I claim her as mine. She will bear my protection, my care, and my name. The hall erupted in shock. Gasps and murmurs spread like wildfire. Some alphas bristled, their pride wounded by Kale's decision. Some betas whispered accusations under their breath. And the Omegas, some terrified, some jealous, could not comprehend why the king would claim the fragile, quiet girl they had mocked. Lyra's face burned with embarrassment, fear, and disbelief all at once. She wanted to protest, to say she could not possibly deserve such honor, but Kale's golden eyes held hers, steady and unwavering. There was no room for argument. This was not a question. It was a command of destiny, and in his presence, destiny could not be ignored. You claim me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Kale's lips curved into a faint smile, though his eyes remained serious. "Yes, you have survived where others would falter. You have shown courage in ways many cannot even imagine. You have strength hidden beneath what others call weakness. I claim that strength, and I claim you." A murmur ran through the hall. Lyra could feel the weight of their disbelief pressing down on her. She had never imagined being the center of such attention, much less in the presence of the Alpha King. Her heart raced, but beneath the fear, a strange warmth began to spread, a flicker of pride in something she could not yet name. The challenge came swiftly. A jealous beta named Ronan stepped forward, a sneer twisting his face. "You claim her, Alpha," he said, voice dripping with disdain. "She is frail, she is weak. You cannot trust her to bear even the simplest duties of our pack." Kale's gaze turned to Ronan and the hall went silent. The Alpha's presence alone silenced the bravest and loudest. "She is stronger than you will ever understand," Kale said, his voice low but commanding. "And I will not tolerate your doubt." Ronan's ears flattened and he backed away. The message was clear. The king's word was final. Lyra felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. The protection Kale offered was powerful, yet it came with responsibilities she could barely comprehend. Days passed and life within the castle began to change. The whispers and ridicule did not vanish entirely, but now there was a new respect, or at least a cautious fear, when others looked at her. Kale's claim made her untouchable in some ways, but the world of the castle was not so easily tamed. Lyra found herself drawn into Kale's world more than she had anticipated. He watched over her, not with suspicion, but with an intense, quiet attention that both comforted and unsettled her. Each encounter left her breathless, sometimes from fear, sometimes from the strange warmth his presence stirred in her heart. But Kale also carried a weight she could sense. Though he was powerful, even feared, there was a shadow around him, a loneliness and burden he could not share easily. She caught glimpses of it in his eyes during quiet moments, the faintest flicker of vulnerability that he did not let others see. One evening, as snow fell silently over the castle, Kale led Lyra to the private gardens, a place even quieter than the one she had once wandered alone. Frost clung to the branches like frozen lace, and the moonlight painted the snow in silver hues. "You have changed since I claimed you," Kale said quietly. "Not in appearance, but in presence. You carry yourself differently now." Lyra's cheeks flushed. I am trying," she admitted softly. "I do not want to disappoint you." "You cannot disappoint me," Kale said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I see your courage, I see your heart, that is enough. You are already stronger than you know." Her heart thumped, and for the first time she felt a spark of confidence. Perhaps Kale truly saw her for who she was, not the fragile, mocked Omega, but someone capable of more than she had imagined. But their quiet moment was interrupted. A messenger arrived, breathless and trembling, with a note sealed in crimson wax. Kale broke the seal, and his expression darkened as he read. The message was brief but alarming. A rival pack had learned of Lyra's claim, and they saw it as a weakness to exploit. Their emissaries were on the way, and danger was approaching faster than the castle could prepare. Kale's ears flattened and his body tensed. "You must stay close," he said to Lyra, taking her hand for the first time. His touch was firm, reassuring, yet it sent shivers down her spine. "No one will harm you. I will not allow it." Lyra nodded, gripping his hand tightly. Fear and excitement warred within her. For the first time, she felt both the weight and the warmth of being truly protected. The following days were a blur of preparation. Kale trained her in subtle skills, how to read danger, how to move quietly, how to use the shadows to her advantage. Though small and delicate, Lyra discovered that her mind and instincts could compensate for what others called weakness. One night as they practiced in the moonlit courtyard, Lyra paused, her chest heaving from effort. I do not know if I am ready," she admitted, voice trembling. Kale's golden eyes softened. "You are ready," he said firmly. "You have been ready all along." The world only needed to see it. And just as the words left his lips, the howls of the rival pack echoed in the distance, sharp and chilling. The castle trembled with the threat of an attack, and the tension that had been growing all week exploded into urgent danger. Lyra's heart raced. The prophecy, the claim, the whispers, they were no longer abstract ideas. The danger was real, immediate, and inescapable. Yet standing beside Kale, she felt something she had never felt before, a spark of courage that burned brighter than fear. As the first shadows of the attackers appeared on the frozen hills, Kale's hand tightened around hers. "Stay close," he said, his voice steady. "We face this together." Lyra nodded, her fear tempered by determination. She would not be the weak Omega anyone believed her to be. She would rise, stand, and face the darkness. For herself, for Kale, and for the destiny that had chosen her, the castle had never felt so tense. Snow still blanketed the battlements and courtyards, but the danger that had been hinted at before was now real. The rival pack that had threatened them in Part 2 had vanished as quickly as it had arrived, but their warning lingered like smoke in the cold halls. Lyra walked cautiously beside Kale, her small hands clasped tightly together. Her heart still pounded from the sudden threat, but a strange resolve had begun to grow inside her. She had never been this close to power before. The Alpha King, Kale, was not just a ruler, he was a force of nature. His golden eyes, sharp and commanding, could pierce through the walls others built around themselves. And yet, in moments like these, she glimpsed a part of him no one else saw. A man burdened by duty, haunted by the past, and fiercely protective of what he valued. Lyra's steps faltered as they reached the private gardens. Frost glimmered on the hedges, and moonlight reflected off the ice like countless stars scattered across the ground. Kale stopped and turned to her, his expression softer than it had ever been. "You have grown since I claimed you," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of admiration and concern. "Stronger than you realize." Lyra swallowed hard. "I am trying," she said softly, "but I am still afraid. So much is happening and I do not understand it all." Kale's gaze softened and he reached out to gently tilt her chin up. "Fear is not weakness," he said. "Even the strongest warriors feel it. The difference is how they face it. And you, Lyra, have faced more than most, and yet you stand here." A warmth spread through her chest at his words. For the first time she felt truly seen, not as the weakest Omega, not as someone to be mocked, but as someone capable of courage and strength. Yet beneath the warmth, a quiet worry stirred. The prophecy Kale had received still hung over them, unspoken yet undeniable. The next days were filled with lessons she had never imagined. Kale trained her not in brute strength but in awareness, strategy, and subtle power. He taught her how to read the mood of the castle, the intentions of those around her, and the signs of danger in the air. He showed her that courage was not measured by physical ability alone. It was measured by heart, by mind, and by the choices one made in the face of fear. Lyra absorbed everything with quiet determination. She was not strong in muscle, but she learned that her mind and intuition could be just as powerful. And Kale's presence was a constant anchor, steadying her when doubts threatened to overwhelm her. One evening, as the sun dipped below the icy peaks and painted the sky in crimson and gold, Lyra felt a sudden, strange unease. Her body trembled not from cold but from something deeper, something unknown. She looked up at Kale, who had noticed her pause. "You are uneasy," he said softly. "What is it?" Lyra hesitated, unsure how to speak the truth. I feel different," she admitted. "Something has changed in me and I do not know what it is." Kale's expression sharpened, concern flickering in his golden eyes. He reached for her hands, holding them firmly. "Show me," he said, voice gentle but urgent. Lyra's lips trembled as she spoke. I think I am carrying your child." For a moment, Kale's eyes widened in shock. Then he lowered his gaze to her stomach, his expression softening into something rare, gentleness, awe, and a deep sense of responsibility. "Your child," he whispered, almost reverently. Lyra nodded, fear and hope mingling in her chest. She had expected disbelief, anger, or rejection, yet Kale's reaction was none of these. Instead, it was a quiet understanding, a protective intensity that left her trembling. "Yes," she said softly. "I do not know how or why, but it is true." Kale drew her close, wrapping his arms around her in a protective embrace. "Then we will face this together," he said firmly. "No harm will come to you or our child. I swear it." In the weeks that followed, Lyra's life changed in ways she had never imagined. The castle became both a haven and a prison. The whispers of her peers had not vanished entirely, but now there was a mix of fear, curiosity, and awe. Even the betas who had once mocked her now gave her wary respect, though their envy lingered like a shadow. Kale remained at her side constantly, his protective nature both comforting and overwhelming. He was teaching her, guiding her, and preparing her for challenges that she could not yet comprehend. But Lyra also sensed the strain upon him. The Alpha King carried burdens unseen, responsibilities that weighed heavily on his shoulders. He rarely spoke of the past, but Lyra could see glimpses of it in his eyes, losses, regrets, and sacrifices that had shaped him into the man he was. One night as they walked along the castle walls under a pale moon, Kale spoke quietly. "There is a darkness that follows my line," he said, "a curse that has haunted my family for generations. It will not rest easily, and now it reaches you as well." Lyra's breath caught. "A curse," she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. Kale nodded solemnly. "Yes, it is ancient and it can affect even those I love most. You and our child, you are not immune." Lyra's mind raced. She had faced ridicule, isolation, and fear, but this was something different, something far greater than she had imagined. "Then, what do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling but determined. Kale turned to her, his golden eyes burning with intensity. "We face it," he said. "Together, you have strength, Lyra, even if you cannot see it yet, and I will stand beside you. I will not let this darkness harm you." The days grew colder, and the tension within the castle deepened. Strange occurrences began, whispers in the halls, shadows that moved on their own, and fleeting glimpses of figures no one else could see. The old magic of the kingdom, dormant for generations, was awakening. Kale explained that the prophecy and the curse were linked, and that Lyra's role was more important than she could imagine. Lyra struggled with doubt. She questioned herself constantly, wondering if she was truly capable of facing the trials ahead. She was small, fragile, and untested. Yet every time she looked at Kale, every time she felt his steady presence beside her, a quiet courage blossomed within her. One evening, as they prepared for another visit from the rival pack, Lyra felt a sharp pain in her chest. She stumbled and Kale caught her immediately. "Lyra!" he exclaimed, his voice sharp with concern. She pressed a hand to her stomach, the fear and wonder of her unborn child overwhelming her. "Kale, it is happening," she whispered, fear and awe mingling in her voice. Kale held her close, his heart pounding. "I am here," he said firmly. "You are not alone. We will face this and we will survive." The rival pack arrived that night under the cover of darkness. They moved swiftly, intending to strike fear into the castle and test Kale's defenses. But Lyra, guided by instincts she had never trusted before, helped Kale anticipate their movements, avoid traps, and defend the castle with strategies that surprised even him. Though small and delicate, Lyra's mind and courage became a force Kale had not expected. She was no longer merely an Omega to be protected. She was a partner in strength, intuition, and strategy. Together, they repelled the threat, their bond deepening with each passing challenge. When the night ended and the castle was safe once more, Lyra leaned against Kale, exhausted but triumphant. I did not know I could do that," she admitted softly. Kale brushed her hair back gently, his golden eyes full of pride and tenderness. "You are stronger than anyone ever believed," he said, "including yourself. And this child you carry, it is the hope for a future that only you could create." Lyra's heart swelled at his words, but beneath the warmth, a shadow of doubt remained. The prophecy, the curse, and the unseen dangers still loomed. The journey was far from over. The sun had barely begun to rise over the snow-dusted peaks surrounding the Lycan kingdom. The castle, which had once seemed serene and secure, now hummed with tension. The prophecy that had hung over Lyra and Kale for weeks weighed heavier than ever, and the shadow from the mysterious figure in the forest lingered like a storm threatening to break. Lyra stood in the private gardens, her small hands resting on her growing stomach. The frost glimmered under her fingers, and the moonlight still clung to the branches of the hedges, casting long, silvery shadows. She breathed deeply, trying to steady the nervous flutter in her chest. She was no longer just an Omega mocked for weakness. She was carrying the Alpha King's child, a child prophesied to change the fate of their kingdom. Kale approached silently, his golden eyes glowing softly in the early light. He stopped beside her, letting his presence offer the protection and reassurance she had come to rely on. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low but firm. Lyra turned to him, her gaze steady despite the fear inside her. I think I am," she admitted. "I do not know what awaits us, but I cannot run anymore. Not now, not ever." Kale nodded, pride and awe in his expression. "Then we face it together," he said. "Whatever comes, we will not falter." The castle's gates had already begun to stir with activity. Word of the prophecy and Lyra's role had spread quietly but swiftly, reaching ears that hungered for power. Rival factions within the kingdom began to stir, sensing weakness in the fragile Omega and seeking to exploit it. But what they did not know was that Lyra was no longer the timid girl they had mocked. Inside her, something had awakened. A quiet strength, long hidden, had begun to grow, intertwining with the life she carried. She could feel it in her bones, in her instincts, in the way the air seemed to shift around her. This was not mere courage. It was something older, something connected to the ancient bloodlines of the kingdom, and Kale had been right. She was capable of more than anyone had imagined. The first challenge came in the form of a sudden attack on the northern walls of the castle. Shadows moved with unnatural speed, and Lyra could sense the danger even before the alarm sounded. Kale's hand gripped hers, steadying her as he guided her to a vantage point overlooking the courtyard. "Do not be afraid," he said, his golden eyes locking with hers. "Trust your instincts. You have power inside you that no one can take away, not even them." Lyra's heart pounded, but she nodded. She drew in a deep breath, letting the cold air fill her lungs, and focused. She could sense the movement of the attackers, the subtle shifts in the snow, the almost imperceptible echoes of their steps. It was as if the kingdom itself was whispering to her, guiding her to act. Kale watched her in awe as she moved with surprising grace and precision. Though small and delicate, her presence commanded attention. She directed the castle's defenders, predicted the attackers' movements, and helped create traps that turned the tide in their favor. For the first time, she realized that the whispers about her weakness had been wrong. Her strength was not in muscle or size. It was in clarity, courage, and a mind sharpened by years of survival. And Kale, standing beside her, was the only one who had truly seen it from the start. After the attackers were repelled, Lyra collapsed against Kale, exhausted but triumphant. His arms wrapped around her, and she could feel the warmth and protection radiating from him. "You were incredible," he said softly, "stronger than I ever imagined." Lyra pressed her face against his chest, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. I did not know I could be," she whispered. "You always could," Kale replied, his voice filled with certainty. "You just needed to believe it yourself." The victory, however, did not end the danger. The prophecy had warned them that the Omega she carried would be the key to the kingdom's fate. It was not only the rival pack that threatened them. It was the ancient curse that had haunted Kale's bloodline for generations. That night, Kale led Lyra to the throne room, where the oldest tomes of the kingdom were kept. The air was heavy with the scent of old parchment and candle wax. Kale opened a book bound in silver and leather, revealing writings of magic, prophecy, and curses. "This curse has followed my family for centuries," Kale explained, his voice solemn. "It can twist even the strongest pack members against each other, and now it seeks you and the child you carry. But there is hope. The Omega's true strength can break it, if she embraces it fully." Lyra listened intently, her fingers tracing the faded runes. I do not know if I can, she admitted. It feels too much, too big, too impossible. Kale knelt beside her, lifting her chin with gentle fingers. You are not alone, he said, voice steady. You have me and the child. The courage you carry is stronger than any curse. Trust yourself, Lyra. You are ready. Days passed, and Lyra practiced the ancient rituals guided by Kale. She learned to channel her courage, intuition, and the hidden power within her Omega bloodline. She discovered that her so-called weakness had been a shield, protecting her until the moment she could awaken fully. Finally, the night came when the curse would test them. Shadows crept through the castle, twisting the minds of those who had once been loyal. The rival factions, stirred by fear and greed, sought to turn the pack against Kale. And in the heart of the storm, the mysterious figure from the forest appeared once more, their intentions unknown. Lyra stood beside Kale in the throne room, the snow falling outside in thick flakes. The air was alive with tension, charged with magic and destiny. Kale's hand held hers, his strength grounding her as the shadows closed in. You are ready, he whispered. Trust yourself, trust the child, trust what you carry inside. Lyra nodded, feeling the life within her respond, filling her with warmth and courage. She raised her hands, letting the power flow through her. The shadows recoiled, unable to penetrate the force she had become. Her voice rang out, steady and commanding, as if the castle itself echoed her resolve. The mysterious figure stepped forward, their cloak falling away to reveal a face lined with age and wisdom. So, this is the Omega, they said softly. The one spoken of in prophecy. You carry more than a child, you carry hope. Lyra met their gaze, her own resolve unshakable. I carry what must be protected, she said firmly, and no darkness, curse, or fear will take it from me. The shadows shrieked and dispersed, the curse weakened by the Omega's courage and the child's presence. The rival factions faltered, unable to continue under the weight of her newfound power. Kale stood beside her, pride and love shining in his golden eyes. Together, they had faced the prophecy and survived. When the night finally ended, Lyra and Kale stood on the highest balcony of the castle. The first light of dawn stretched across the mountains, painting the snow in gold and pink. The air was crisp and still, as if the kingdom itself had paused to witness the moment. Kale pulled Lyra close, his forehead resting against hers. You have done it, he whispered. You have faced what no one else could. You are no longer the Omega they mocked. You are the light of this kingdom, the strength of our family, and the hope of the future. Lyra's eyes glistened with tears, a mixture of relief, pride, and joy. I could not have done it without you, she admitted softly. You saw me when no one else did. Kale smiled, brushing a lock of hair from her face. And I always will, he said. Together we are unstoppable, and our child will carry that strength forward. The castle, once a place of fear and ridicule, now felt alive with possibility. The walls echoed not with whispers of weakness, but with the promise of courage, love, and unity. Lyra had become more than anyone could have imagined. The Omega who had risen, embraced her destiny, and reshaped the fate of the kingdom. As they looked out over the snow-covered mountains, a single thought settled in Lyra's heart. She was no longer afraid. She was no longer the weakest. She was a mother, a warrior, a partner to the Alpha King, and a beacon of hope. And yet, even in the calm of dawn, Kale's gaze swept the horizon, alert to the future. For destiny was never truly finished, and the world would always test the courage of those who dared to rise above fear. But at that moment, Lyra knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was ready. She had faced darkness and survived. She had found strength in herself and in the bond she shared with Kale. And together, they would face whatever challenges the world had yet to send, their hearts, courage, and love unbreakable.